This is Here's How, Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast, presented by William Campbell.
Thank you for downloading episode 97 of Here's How for the 16th of January 2020. An election is underway, but will everyone get a fair chance to vote? In this podcast, I'll talk to one politician about the obstacles in the way of people, particularly young people, who want to exercise their franchise.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
Coming up in a few minutes, voters that might vote for you, Sean, are more settled people and they'll probably have a higher age profile. That's true, isn't it?
Not a bit. I was out last night.
Hang on, Sean. No, be honest. I'm sure you have loads of young people. I'm sure you've got gorgeous young girls who are only running after you to vote for you. But the reality of it is, Sean, that when the exit polls are done, Fianna Fáil perform better in higher age demographics. That is true,
yes,
isn't it?
I think that's a fact, yeah.
That's coming up shortly, but first I want to thank all of my donors on Patreon, especially Chris Dermody, who signed up as a patron since the last podcast. I really appreciate everyone who does that. If you don't know, Patreon is a system that allows people to donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month, and that helps me to devote more time to research and to finding interesting guests. If you think that you could do the same as Chris and the other donors, there's details on the website and at the end of the show. Nobody likes taxes. People don't like paying taxes, but also they don't like talking about or even thinking about taxes. It stresses people out. You can even see that in the support for proposals for things like flat taxes, because people think that they are much simpler, even if they pay just the same or more. Politicians know this, particularly when they make promises like this.
My opponent won't rule out raising taxes, but I will, and the Congress will push me to raise taxes, and I'll say no. And they'll push, and I'll say no. And they'll push again, and I'll say, read my lips. No new taxes.
And, of course, when those promises are broken, there are serious ramifications. Any politician going into an election promising to introduce a new tax isn't likely to prosper. But that's just what the economist David McWilliams is recommending. And he's right. In fact, he doesn't go far enough. McWilliams' article on the topic is titled, "The Party That Taxes Land Hoarding Will Get My Vote." I would argue that we need a wide-ranging property tax that covers all property. That would include houses, building land, agricultural land, commercial and industrial property, the lot. And before you start saying that you don't want to pay any more tax, bear in mind that I'm not advocating you should pay more tax. I'm saying that taxes should be levied in a different way. To be clear, this is not to collect more tax or less tax. This is to collect the same amount in a different way. So why go to the bother of changing the system if you're collecting the same amount of money as before? The reason why is because incentives matter. Right now, Ireland is almost unique in the developed world in that almost our entire tax take is levied on economic activity, with income tax, VAT, stamp duty, excise duty, VRT and others. Ireland has basically no taxes on economic inactivity. And this matters. If you tax brown bread and you don't tax white bread, then people will eat more white bread. This has a real impact on people's economic activity. Right now, hoarding and speculating on property attracts no tax whatsoever. We have plenty of experience with tax exemption schemes for everything from nursing homes to the film industry, and the reaction to them is very predictable. When you make an area of the economy tax exempt, you suck in not just capital, but also talent and initiative. In Ireland, since the abolition of rates, we've been running a 40-year-long experiment to find out what happens when you make property holding into one giant tax-free scheme. And the results are in. They aren't too surprising. Making property tax-free in Ireland has sucked huge amounts of investment capital into the property market, giving us the highest house prices and the highest land prices of almost anywhere in Europe, despite the fact that we have the lowest population density of any country in Europe. Get that into your head. Normally, more supply means lower prices. But Ireland, with the highest supply around, also has the highest prices. But it's worse than that. Because of people hoarding land in places like Dublin 3, Dublin 7 and Dublin 8, people have been forced to build commuter estates as far out as Longford. Ghost estates are without a doubt a result of making property tax-free. Most of those derelict sites in Dublin were bought up for a song in the 1980s, with hugely wealthy landowners now drip-feeding the market to keep the prices high. It costs them literally nothing to keep those sites empty, but it's sucking the lifeblood out of Dublin and other urban areas. The fact that people can hoard land tax-free is the direct cause of the lack of housing and the huge prices that people have to pay for it. That feeds inflation into our economy. When you pay more in Ireland for a loaf of bread or for a childminder or for anything else, when you pay more for those than you would in France or in Germany, it's because the difference is to pay for the higher housing costs for those workers, and sooner or later that difference is going into the pocket of property speculators. If we want a modern grown-up economy, we're going to have to be grown up about reforming our tax system, and that means taxing property like every other modern economy does.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you want your point of view heard, dial 076 603 5060 and leave a contribution for the show. The lines are open 24/7 and you can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
On the line, I have Sean Fleming. Sean is currently Fianna Fáil TD for Laois. If the gods of the ballot box smile on him, you're the gods, by the way, listeners. If the gods of the ballot box smile on him, he might become Fianna Fáil TD for the reconstituted constituency of Laois Offaly. He's been a TD since 1997. Before that, for about 15 years, he was the financial director of Fianna Fáil. And Sean, just before the election was called, you raised an issue about who's going to be able to vote. Can you tell me what that is exactly?
Yeah, it's very straightforward, and the matter is still unresolved, and we're in day 2 of the campaign. Mm-hmm. The situation is, every year the local authorities, in conjunction with the department, print a new register for the voters' register so people can vote, and that holds for 12 months, and is renewed every 12 months. Mm-hmm. So the current register expires on the 14th of February, that's the time, and the new one comes in on the 15th. So a number of people wanting to be on the register for 2020 put their names on the draft register last September and October to be included on the new register for this year. But because the Taoiseach called the election a week before the new register comes into effect, those people who put their names on that draft register to have a vote from the 15th of February on would not now have a vote because the election is called a week early.
Okay.
So we've never had this situation before where we actually had an election in the week when the register was actually expiring.
Okay, and this is important. I mean, democracy has been seen to be under attack around the world, and if this undermines faith in democracy, it's self-evidently going to be damaging. And I don't think it's as bad as you say it is. I think it's worse. I think it's much, much worse, and it's built into the system. You say we've never had an election in February, certainly not for a long time. But why in the hell is it built into the system that if you move house in December of a year, you can't then register to vote until the following November, and then you're not eligible to vote until the February after that. So literally, you can't vote in an election until the election after the February, after the November, after you move house. That's crazy, isn't it?
It is. Now, there is reform required, but there is a way of dealing with that with people who've moved houses and people in general. When an election is called, like this one, the government sets out a procedure whereby you can fill up a form, get it stamped by the Gardaí, and get on what they call a supplementary register in addition. So there is ability for all your listeners, if to do this by the beginning of next week, by next Monday, print down the form RFA2 from the Department's Voters Register website, but you have to go and get it stamped by the Gardaí to prove your ID. And leave it
pause on that for ID, because I've got up on screen, and I'll post a link to this. I've got this form. This is a 3-page form that you have to fill out, and following the 3-page form that you have to fill out, there's 3 pages of notes.
Correct.
You have to go to a Garda station with ID, get it stamped and signed, and then you have to go to the local authority. Given how tight the deadline is, there's no point in using in putting it in the post. You then have to go to the local authority. You basically have to go and ask God to get registered to vote. This is crazy hoops to jump through, and this requirement to have the Gardaí stamp and sign it, that's entirely new. That was only brought in a couple of elections back, isn't that correct?
It is, and I'm being upfront. The reason why that measure was brought in is because Sinn Féin brought some of the electoral practices they had in Northern Ireland down here, whereby coming up to the week before an election, they got thousands of people on the register, phony names, phony addresses, and swamped registers, and got people to get votes who shouldn't have been entitled to it. So Oireachtas Éireann decided we can't have this happening because we're abusing democracy. And we said, if you want to get on the register at the last minute with a fortnight to go, you must have proof of identity stamped by the guards. So we had to take extreme measures, and this shouldn't normally be the case.
Okay, but pause on that, Sean, because one question I have on that. You've obviously been employed by Fianna Fáil for many years, and you've been a TD for more than 20 years. So the whole of your adult life, you've been in the thick of elections and politics and so forth. Typically, in any given constituency, how many votes are on the supplementary register in each election?
I'm going to tell you, for the locals and European elections last year, 2,000 people went on in Laois on the supplementary register to get voting for and it happened for the referendum as well. Nearly 100,000 nationwide. Now, the reason the figures were so high, people knew the local elections were coming up. They knew the European elections date was set 6 months out. So the students' unions and different groups had a campaign running for a month or two to get people onto the supplementary register. That won't happen to that extent this time because, as you said, there's only a week to do this, and you have to print the form, go to your Garda
So for somebody who works a job, which is most people, this is completely impossible, isn't it?
Practically impossible.
Okay, now hold with that thought. Yes, yes, and the local authority offices won't be open at night time. So this is practically impossible to get time off work, to get to a Garda station and then get to your local authority and so forth. This is practically impossible. It's true, isn't it, Sean, that and you mentioned Sinn Féin, but there are other, left-wing and perhaps policy parties that are on the other side of the divide from you. It's true, isn't it, that voters of what they might call conservative parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in particular.
Oh, we're middle ground, but go on.
Okay, voters that might vote for you, Sean, on the whole, are more settled people and they probably have a higher age profile. That's true, isn't it?
Not a bit. I was out last night.
Hang on, Sean. No, be honest. I'm sure you have loads of young people. I'm sure you've got gorgeous young girls who are only running after you to vote for you. But the reality of it is, Sean, that when the exit polls are done, Fianna Fáil and also Fine Gael to a lesser extent perform better in higher age demographics. That is true, isn't it?
I think that's a fact. Yeah.
Okay. And what I'm really worried about here, and I actually wrote about this in a book that I published about 10 years ago, I think it's outrageous that somebody who would move house on the 1st of December 2018 cannot vote on the 8th of February 2020. So if somebody who moves house on the 1st of December 2018 probably will not be able to vote in a general election until 2025, nearly 7 years later. Sean, you talk about security, and I follow you. You know, I agree with you in terms of security of the electoral roll. But I can log on to my computer screen right now, and I can renew my passport. One of the most secure things that one can do. Yeah. I can log into my bank account, and I can transfer tens of thousands of euro to whoever I choose. It is not beyond the capability of humanity to say that you could register to vote online. Why in the hell can you not move house on Wednesday, register to vote on Thursday, and vote on Friday?
What you said is 100% correct, and I believe that will happen. It should have happened before now. You should be able to register online, and the register should be updated on a daily basis. You can check. I did a register last night. This old archaic system of a council printing a list once every 12 months, and then to get on it when an election is called, while it's possible, if you're working away from home and you're commuting, it's very difficult to actually achieve that. Can be done, and I think what happened this time, by calling the election the day it happened, had he postponed it for just 1 week to Saturday the 15th, this problem wouldn't arise, because all those people who put their name on last autumn would now have a vote on the 15th, but he's called it on the 8th, 1 week early. And I felt I spoke about this before the decision was made to dissolve the Dáil, and I think I'm upfront. I think the Taoiseach just showed his disconnect with the ordinary people. He said, sure, you can go register on the supplementary register. You've pointed out the difficulties. The government knew this problem was there. They could have waited 1 week and we wouldn't have this problem now. But the bigger question is, I agree, there should be online registration with your PPS number, because people have only one PPS number, and I believe that will happen in the next Dáil before the next election, but it is not in now. But it should happen.
Can I put a conspiracy? Can I put a conspiracy theory to you? Yeah. Most young people, move house more than once every 7 years. Somebody who turns 18 probably will live, depending on when they leave home, maybe for a year or two with their parents, maybe go to university, go and get a job. The likelihood of people under the age of 30 being able to easily register to vote is extremely low, and for you guys in Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, that suits you just fine.
Well, I'm happy. Like, as I just said, I was out last night canvassing, and I met several people who were working on the register, and I was pre-prepared, and I handed them the form, so they have a few days now to get it stamped into Garda Station, as it so happened last night. But it's a real problem. We met that on the doorstep last night.
Okay, let me put one other issue to you, and this has been changed. But in 2007, Finian McGrath and Catherine Murphy, who are both TDs in the outgoing Dáil, they took a case because the Electoral Boundaries Commission that was changing the borders of Dáil constituencies was being as pernickety and fastidious and difficult as they possibly could, because they had the census data from 2006, but the census data from 2006 hadn't been officially announced. The president hadn't signed it or something like this. And on this basis, they were creating the borders and allocating TDs based on the 2002 census to be used in the 2007 election, which means that it would already be more than 5 years out of date. And of course, by the end of that Dáil, it will be more than 10 years out of date. Now, you know, and I know, Sean, that in the west of the country, where population growth is low, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael do better. And around Dublin and the east of the country, Kildare, Wicklow, those type of constituencies, population growth is very high. And, for example, in the past few decades, Mayo has gone from having 6 TDs to 4. Kildare has gone from having 4 TDs to 7. And it suited you guys just fine to slow down the response of the allocation of TDs to the changes in population. And there's one other issue as well that I want to raise with you.
I'm going to disagree with you on what you just said. Now,
why is that?
I'm going to one, they won their case, which was right, and
no, they didn't. They didn't. They lost the case, but the judge effectively gave a warning that if the case came again.
Yeah, and what has happened since then is once the CSO issues the provisional census figures, which are 99.9999% the same as the final census figures, they can move ahead on that basis because it's so close to the finalists to be immaterial. So they are moving, and they are moving quickly, and that's why we have the new boundary. But the old idea that some people incorrectly have, and it accuse you of being a bit old in your thinking on this one, that Fianna Fáil is strong in the west of Ireland. Not the case. There was a time we had 4 seats in Mayo, 4 seats in Dublin. We've only 2, or 4 seats in Donegal. We've only 2 in each of those counties. We've only 1 in Galway West. Our strongest area, you've just mentioned there are 7 TDs in Kildare at the moment. 4 of them are Fianna Fáil TDs. The greater Dublin area, the expansion into Leinster, the Meaths, the Kildares, the Wicklows.
But at the expense of Fine Gael, the bottom line is that the Conservative parties, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil put together, do way better in areas that are losing population and that have older populations.
Well, we're not doing that well now in the west of Ireland. We're doing much better in Leinster than we are in the west of Ireland in the last couple of elections. Leinster and Munster has been and the west of Ireland, we have, with the declining population, we've proportionally lost a lot of seats. I just gave you the examples of the 3 west. Clare, we have 1 seat out of 4. Kerry, we have 1 seat out of 5. So the entire west coast, we have nowhere near.
I'm not sure if this is a boast, Sean.
No, but you were saying we were strong in the West. They're trying to paint the picture of Fianna Fáil as the old rural west of Ireland, Atlantic coast people.
Currently, for Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil taken together, that I think is the case. But I want to move on to one other one. And this is going back quite some years, and I have been campaigning for more than 10 years that people should be able to, at the very minimum, register to vote online. And I, at one point, just saw a banner ad taken out by the Department of Environment across some page on the internet saying, register to vote, click here. And I thought, God, they've moved, 100 years later, whatever. And I clicked and it said, register to vote, click here. And I had to go through about 3 clicks. And when I got to the 4th page, it said, to register to vote, go to any Garda station or local authority office or library. That's craziness. And the just the laziness of nobody wanting to change anything. The bottom line is that those are the institutions of society from a century ago. The institutions of society today are supermarkets and the internet. Correct. And you said and you made an allegation about Sinn Féin. I can't particularly stand that up, although it's clearly it's clearly your opinion. It's clearly your opinion, yes. But for all that added insecurity, the electoral register is a catastrophe. There was a study done by Audryn Flynn in 2006, and I haven't seen any reforms to change this since then. 860,000 incorrect entries on the electoral register. 860,000, more than a third of all the entries are wrong. And I would put it to Sean that very few of those are entries where people are getting added when they shouldn't be. I would put it to you that the system is so lethargic that people don't get off the electoral register when they should, that there's a lot of graveyard votes in there, that there's a lot of people move house and they stay registered at the old address. But in the aggregate, that enormously disadvantages younger voters. That's true, isn't it?
Yeah, just say to agree with you on what you're saying there. I met in the last election a house, and they were obviously very into politics, and they'd moved 5 times. And they actually had 5 votes in 5 different addresses, which is proven what you said. Also, younger people are not getting on. I agree there should be online voting with the PPS number, and your just vote moves.
So hold up, Sean. Online voting or online registering?
Sorry, I'm coming to the online registering. Now, I'm going to say this, and I know I'm in the minority. When we were in government a number of years ago, we brought in the electronic voting.
Yeah, that was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, we got a roasting on it. Sean Fleming, I might be in the minority one. I think we should have electronic voting. I think if the people vote in the general election in Ireland today, we should know the result by midnight. There's not a remote third world country in the world that when we have an election and you can look on your Sky News, the polls close at 10 o'clock, you have the results within hours. Every European country. We're the only one that takes 3 and 4 days to count the votes in an election. I would agree personally, I'm not saying for Fianna Fáil, with online registration, and I would agree with electronic voting, and we'd have the results very clear. I know people got nervous of that.
Who the hell cares? Sean, you're a TD. I'm probably a bit of an anorak as well. I'd like to have it instantly. Most people don't care. And the difficulty, and there were great difficulties and huge amounts of money spent. And I note that Fianna Fáil was willing to spend money on the electronic voting that they weren't willing to spend on getting the electoral register right. But there were enormous problems with that. And one of them is our electoral system is not amenable to electronic voting, because if you can store all of those records of votes electronically, that means you can search them electronically, and every vote in Ireland is unique. And that
there's no identification of the voter.
There most certainly is. You can absolutely identify yourself. If you're in somewhere like Galway West, where they had, I think, 23 candidates, you can vote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for your top candidates, and then vote the lower candidates in a unique order that is unique to you. And when it was run, I think I looked at it in Dublin North, 25% of the votes were absolutely unique. Only one person voted in that way. And that means there is the opportunity.
You're saying every other country in the world that has electronic voting, every country in Europe shouldn't have it. I don't agree with you.
No country that has SCV has that. And in any case, what problem are you solving?
I think, well, that's the point. People didn't actually want it. They were happy to take the 3 or 4 days.
Sean, answer the question. What problem are you solving?
Well, personally, I'll give you my view on it again. There was a general election in England a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
They had the voting today, and the new government were in situ the following day.
Mm-hmm.
It takes, in Ireland, weeks for the Dáil to reassemble, because there can be count after.
That's nothing to do with. Hang on a second.
No. And we've had situations where the final seat and the final make-up in the Dáil hasn't even been resolved in a week of polling, and I don't think that's efficient in the modern. But back to the voters' registration.
Yes.
Personally, I'm saying this. The system is wrong. The system is archaic. I'm a proponent of wanting change. And what one of those, and I'm going to upset some people by saying this, the job should be taken off the local authorities. They're not capable of doing it. They don't do it, and they've no interest in doing it. They are not in touch. I have a simple view. There's only one organisation in Ireland should have the job of the voters' register, and that's the one organisation that calls every house in the country minimum of once a week, and that's on post. They go to every house. They know the names of the people in every house, because they deliver post to every house every week during the course of the year. And no organisation is more equipped to know who is living where, how quick to change address. And I actually think if Post were given the job, we'd have an absolutely up-to-date register, because they have postmen and postwomen calling to doors every day.
Sean, if you got the amount of misaddressed posts that I get, you might disagree. You might not agree with that. But let me suggest...
That's a personal opinion.
Indeed, yes. But let me suggest that perhaps you're in danger of creating one bureaucracy while taking out another. One person who I spoke to in a large company once said to me that if you want to know who's working in a company, don't bother asking the HR department, ask the payroll department, because anybody who's left off that list will let you know pretty fast. The bottom line is, Sean, that the revenue know exactly who is in the country and who's paying tax or who's paying social welfare. That's pretty much a 99% accurate list of who's going to vote. Why do we need to keep an electoral register at all? We could just print it off the week before the election, or not even print it, just have it on screen.
Yeah, but the revenue don't have details of people's citizenship. Some people...
an easy ad.
An election in Ireland now, you have to be a full Irish citizen to have a vote in a referendum to change the constitution. People from Europe, citizens can vote in European election, but not necessarily...
There's one extra piece of information for them to collect.
Sorry, there's several. There are different voting rules for local elections, European elections, general elections, and presidential elections and referenda. This is not the job of revenue, I hear what you're saying. I'm saying impost, you're saying revenue. The point is there are organisations out there in touch with every household and have details on every house far better than the local authorities. Whichever one it is, I don't mind, but I don't think the local authorities, as you've said at the beginning, the list that they produce is 35% wrong every single year. So both of us agree the job has not been done properly by the current authorities.
We certainly do. Sean Fleming, TD for Laois, perhaps the TD for Laois Offaly very soon. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you indeed. Bye.
Make your view heard. Record your own contribution and email it to podcast@here'show.ie. You can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
Go to the website for sources and references from the show. And while you're there, you can like the show on Facebook, follow the show on Twitter @Here's How Podcast, and get in touch with me if you can suggest a guest or a topic for a future show. And thanks again to Chris and all the other patrons on Patreon. They allow me to devote more time to research and finding interesting guests. And if you could do the same as them and donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month, go to patreon.com/here'show. That link is on the website, and there you can also find out how to subscribe to the podcast for free on your computer, on your phone, or by email. All of that information is at www.here'show.ie. The next show will be uploaded next Thursday, that's the 23rd of January. I'll be talking to Professor Colin Harvey of Queen's University Belfast about Ireland's future. The Here's How podcast is produced and presented by me, William Campbell. Thank you for listening.